S1mple is one of the best players that the world of Counter-Strike has ever seen. He's been ranked top 10 in all the HLTV top 20 players list for the past 5 years, top 2 for the past 3 years, and in the #1 spot in 2018. But he isn't just mechanically good, he also has some of the coolest custom settings that we've ever seen. So today, we're gonna take a look at these settings that he uses to achieve his high levels of play and dominate the competition. Let's get into it.
Real quick, I just want to let you all know that we have a 25% off discount going on the website right now. All you got to do is go in, check out, and enter code FPS25 to get that 25% off discount. All right, now back into the video.
Starting off with the monitor and resolution settings, I want to point something out regarding pro player peripherals. Most of the time, pros can only use equipment that's made by brands that sponsor their organization. For example, since Cloud9 is sponsored by Logitech and HyperX, all of the Cloud9 players have to use equipment made by those two brands. I mention this because I want to make the point that just because a pro uses a certain mouse or keyboard does not mean it's automatically the best one on the market. Now don't get me wrong, these top brands make very good equipment and you'll end up with some good stuff no matter what you use, but I wanted to clarify, most of the time pros can't necessarily pick whatever peripherals they want. With that out of the way, S1mple uses a BenQ XL2540 monitor. This monitor is 240Hz, meaning that the screen updates 240 times in a single second. Using a 240Hz monitor is pretty standard for pro players and they've been around for quite a long time. Because your screen updates more often, you'll actually see enemies appear on your screen before they see you if you're playing on a higher refresh rate. This means that having a higher refresh rate than your opponent actually just gives you a straight up advantage. This is why if you're gonna make an upgrade to your setup, get a high refresh rate monitor. According to former pro Jordan Nothing Gilbert, if you want to reach a high level in CSGO, then you're going to need at least 100Hz to be competitive. Thankfully, with how far monitor technology has come, you can find 120Hz and 144Hz monitors for a very reasonable price. Moving on from the monitor, S1mple uses a 4:3 aspect ratio with a resolution of 1280 by 960. Like most pros, S1mple plays on 4:3 because that's what everyone used in older versions of Counter-Strike. Most pros are just used to playing on these lower resolutions and don't bother adapting to 16:9. S1mple uses a stretched version of this resolution so the game does cover his entire screen, while some other players just prefer to keep the black bars. While stretched resolutions make the targets feel larger than they actually are, some people prefer the black bars so it's easier to focus on the game and less dangerous to look at the minimap. As far as the specific resolution S1mple chose, he said it's because he felt most comfortable with it. Resolution mostly comes down to what feels right for you, so you should play around with different resolutions and see what's working best. Before we continue though, it's time for our question of the day. Today's question is, what setting took you the longest to figure out? For me, it's gotta be sensitivity. I played a lot of MOBAs before I got into FPSs, so the sensitivity was so hard for me to get used to. I spent almost a whole hour playing around in aimbots just to make sure I found the settings that I was most comfortable with. But because of that, my aim feels crisp whenever I get into a game. What about you guys though? Let me know in the comments down below. Moving on, we have S1mple's mouse and sensitivity settings. He uses the Logitech G Pro X Super Light, which is a wireless mouse that weighs 63 grams. For those of you who aren't aware, that is extremely light for a wireless gaming mouse. Most mice, mine included, clock in around 80 to 100 grams without a wireless feature. So the fact that it is wireless and weighs that much just shows you how far technology in the gaming industry has come. Now let's talk about eDPI. eDPI is the DPI in your mouse multiplied by your in-game sensitivity, which gives you a number that you can universally compare to others when talking about sensitivity. For example, if you played on 400 DPI with a 2.0 in-game sensitivity, your eDPI would be 800. Back in the 1.6 days, most mice were 400 DPI to begin with, so pros just kept using it in CSGO. DPI doesn't matter that much to be completely honest, as long as you fine-tune your game settings to your liking. In S1mple's case, he uses a DPI of 400 along with an in-game sensitivity of 3.09 and a zoom sensitivity of 1. This gives him an eDPI of 1236, which is definitely in the higher end for pro play sensitivities, but it makes sense considering how often he opts for his team. Someone like S1mple, whose playstyle heavily involves hitting insane flick shots, likes to play on higher sensitivities to make them easier to hit. A higher sense means a larger range of control while sacrificing margin for error. If you want to improve your opping skills and play like S1mple, head on over to ProGuides.com where you can watch S1mple's master course for CSGO. He has a full video dedicated to opping just like him, and if you're an aspiring opper, you might want to go check it out. Before moving on though, there's a couple things I want to talk about regarding mouse settings. First, let's talk about polling rate. Similar to refresh rate, polling rate is how many times the mouse updates in a single second. Instead of refreshing the screen though, the mouse is reporting its position to the computer. For example, a polling rate of 500 Hz means that the mouse is reporting its position to the computer every 2 milliseconds. Most gaming mice max out at 1000 Hz, and that's what S1mple has his mouse set to. There used to be some theories that claimed a higher polling rate would overload the mouse, so some players would only use 500 Hz. With today's technology though, this isn't really possible, so there's no reason to not use the 1000 Hz polling rate unless you're one of those masochists who like to make the game harder on purpose. Mouse acceleration is a very weird setting, and most people don't use it for a good reason. Mouse acceleration uses the speed at which you move your mouse to adjust your crosshair and not the actual distance. If you were to move your mouse 3 centimeters really quickly, it would make you turn really fast. And if you moved the same distance at a much slower pace, your crosshairs wouldn't go anywhere nearly as far. The only situation where mouse acceleration is somewhat viable is when you have a really low sensitivity and you feel like you need the extra boost from mouse acceleration to cover some more ground. Some pro players do use mouse acceleration, but overall, I'd say it's too much risk involved for the potential reward. It seems like S1mple agrees because he has mouse acceleration set to off as well. You're free to try it if you want, but don't come crying to me when you can't hit any of your shots. Raw input is a setting that has some weird stigma about it, but it's probably the best to keep it on. Certain software on your computer, whether it be your drivers or mouse software, could potentially add acceleration or smoothing to your mouse, which makes your mouse movement look nicer but sacrifices precision in the process. By enabling raw input, you tell the game to ignore this external software and only pay attention to the inputs that you're physically giving to the mouse. Most players have raw input on, including S1mple. If you're a newer player, I recommend starting with this thing on, but if you've been playing for a while and you're comfortable aiming without using raw input, I don't think it's an absolute necessity to change. That being said though, if you're willing to try something new, I think you'd benefit from it. Now let's talk about Crosshair. If you want to see S1mple's Crosshair, here it is. One thing about crosshairs is that some players like to change them often, and S1mple is no exception to this rule. In fact, by the time this video gets released, he'll probably be using a different one. Since crosshairs are only visual and don't change anything about the gameplay itself, it's not difficult for players like S1mple to adjust to a new one in a short period of time. However, the vast majority of pros will still use a static crosshair. Static crosshairs are ones that don't move at all, even when you're moving or shooting. Good players that have mastered movement and recoil don't need a dynamic crosshair to tell them when they aren't standing still. Your crosshair is 100% preference and doesn't directly impact your performance, so if you like to change your crosshairs often and you don't have any problems doing so, I won't stop you. Next, let's get into S1mple's video settings. Every setting regarding visual quality is at the lowest possible setting. This includes global shadow quality, shader detail, texture detail, and effect detail. Ultimately, there's two reasons for this. The first is for visible purposes, and the second is just for a higher frame rate. To be completely honest, there isn't a game-breaking difference between high quality and low quality video settings as long as your eyes are comfortable with what you're looking at. However, the one video setting that does make a difference is brightness. S1mple has the max brightness, and you should too. The reason for this is to improve visibility and help you see players in darker areas. Some great examples of places where brightness can help you include connector on overpass and underneath the porch on the truck side of Inferno. Being able to detect an enemy as fast as you can give you an advantage over the other player and help you win an aim duel that you might not have won if your brightness didn't allow you to see them as quickly. Be sure to play around with video settings on your own and find something that's comfortable for you. That being said though, if you're on a lower end computer, you probably shouldn't sacrifice your frame rate for better looking graphics. Every millisecond in this game is important, and I don't want to hear you complaining about lag when you die. Finally, let's talk about something called the Placebo Effect. The placebo effect is when you think that something is helping you perform better, but it's really just all in your head. Placebo is something that gets talked about a lot when it comes to settings, because some players will tell you that turning on a certain setting or changing their crosshairs made them play better. While some settings might feel more comfortable to you, most of the time, they won't actually increase your performance in the game. It's important to remember that copying a pro player settings does not allow you to take a shortcut and improve faster. You still need to put the time in training your aim and crosshair placement, communication, and work out your mistakes through watching your own demos. If you feel like you're struggling, please don't blame your settings. Instead, try a coaching session with one of our expert coaches at ProGuides.com. They'll be sure to walk you through one of your games and show you what you're actually doing wrong while also introducing some ways that you can fix those problems. Changing your sensitivity and resolution every game is not the answer.
So now that you've seen what settings S1mple likes to use, play around with your own and see if you want to try making any adjustments. Also, if this video helps you find more comfortable settings yourself, leave a comment down below on what you're going to change up, drop a like in the video, and also sub to the channel so that you don't miss out on our future uploads. Anyway, best of luck grinding everybody, and I'll see you in the next one.